Imagine this scenario. Someone calls you out. They demand an apology. They put you directly on the spot. Most people in this moment collapse. They try to defend themselves, nervously saying, "I'm so sorry. That wasn't my intention." But Machiavelli, the master strategist, would never, ever fight on someone else's terms. He wouldn't waste energy defending his intentions. He'd expertly redirect their attention. He'd calmly respond, "I hear that's how it came across. That wasn't the experience I had." There are always many sides to a story. Notice, he never admits direct guilt. Instead, he introduces complexity, and complexity in this context makes any apology unnecessary. As Machiavelli famously wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." In modern terms, the very moment someone demands your apology, you are already being strategically positioned beneath them. Your task is to refuse this positioning, not by fighting them head-on, but by subtly fogging the glass, making the situation less clear. Machiavelli deeply understood the counterintuitive art of emotional absorption. If someone confronts you with an accusation, you don't deny it. You don't react defensively. You don't get trapped in a furious argument. Instead, you look at them. You let them speak. You let them unload everything they feel, every accusation, and then, crucially, you offer no justification. You simply say, "That's a lot to think about. Thanks for being honest. Noted." You've given them the illusion of release, the feeling of having spoken their mind, but you've provided no confirmation of their accusations. Because you didn't confess, they can't pin you down. You've neutralized their attempt at control by offering zero resistance and zero confession. Your calm presence, your subtle ambiguity, your silence that refuses to validate their weaponized words. That's your power. Machiavelli would never truly feel guilt as a moral truth. Instead, he'd use it strategically, almost like a disguise. If he needed to look remorseful, he would. Not because he genuinely felt it, but because it worked. If he needed to seem regretful, he'd meticulously choose the perfect moment, the precise tone, and the right audience. But behind that carefully constructed mask, he's still coldly calculating his next move, because real internalized guilt weakens you, but performed guilt can be a potent tool for manipulation. In today's world, guilt has become a currency. People will actively try to extract it from you, hoping to trade it for your silence, your compliance, your complete submission. And when you offer that apology, you've paid the tax. You've signed the contract. You've willingly entered their emotional economy on their terms. But when you stay silent, when you refuse to play that game, you force them to carry the discomfort themselves. And that is a masterclass in psychological warfare. You now understand why a real, genuine apology can drain your power. But what about fake ones? What about apologies that aren't driven by truth, but by strategic advantage? This is the only kind of apology Machiavelli endorsed. Not born from remorse, not from genuine accountability, but purely from strategy. The ends for Machiavelli always justify the means. And if your desired outcome requires an apology, then you lie, you perform, you win. It's all about lowering their defenses. Let's break down exactly how Machiavelli would execute this. He offers an apology. It's humble, it's sincere, it's perfectly timed. His opponents relax, they drop their guard, they stop their aggressive pursuit. He uses this moment to recalibrate, to gain access, to gather influence, to evoke sympathy, and then he moves again. Precisely when they're no longer watching. That apology wasn't a genuine gesture of peace. It was a perfectly deployed Trojan horse. In moments of intense conflict, high tension, or public failure. Sometimes the only viable path forward is to pretend you're the one retreating. A carefully calculated apology makes you look harmless. It subtly reframes you from being a formidable opponent to a misunderstood ally. This is precisely how Machiavelli would handle powerful enemies. He'd admit to overstepping boundaries. He'd confess that his words may have sounded too direct. He'd express regret for any confusion caused. This sounds soft. It makes others feel safe. But behind it, there is no fundamental change, no real regret, no actual surrender. There is only forward movement, executed skillfully under the cloak of humility. As Machiavelli famously taught, one must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Sometimes the fox says, "I'm sorry I frightened you," even while he's already circling your weak side, identifying your vulnerabilities. Watch the most cunning manipulators today. They instinctively know when to offer accountability. But pay close attention. They often say sorry just before they launch a devastating comeback. They apologize just enough to reset the public tone. They express regret in a way that expertly refocuses attention onto them rather than onto their original offense. Machiavelli would employ the exact same tactics. He wouldn't fight every single accusation. Instead, he'd take one knee, appear to concede, and then rise higher, more powerful, when the crowd's anger has softened. Here's one of the most dangerously effective manipulations. I know I hurt you, and I truly hate myself for it. What seems like a deeply vulnerable apology is actually a clever bait for emotional reattachment. You're not genuinely seeking forgiveness. You're forcing the other person to feel guilty for your guilt. They forget their own pain because now they're too busy soothing you. This is a classic Machiavellian move. It subtly rebalances the entire emotional dynamic in your favor. And now, they hesitate to push back, to question you, or to leave. You've offered an apology, yes, but you've also completely flipped the frame. Now you appear as the victim, and they become the aggressor for not instantly forgiving you. Let's be absolutely clear. Using this kind of strategic apology requires surgical precision. If it's done too sincerely, you genuinely lose power. If it's done too cynically, you completely lose trust. But if it's executed surgically, with the right tone, the right motive, and the right aftermath, you don't just keep control. You often gain more power than you had before. In today's world, apologies are often no longer about integrity. They're about compelled compliance. Society often doesn't genuinely want your growth. It wants your submission. It doesn't truly seek your transformation, but merely your public display of weakness. And that's precisely why Machiavelli would absolutely dismantle this modern apology trap. Because he knew men are quick to forget benefits, slow to forget injuries. And when you offer that apology, you essentially carve the injury into memory. You brand yourself as guilty, even if you weren't truly at fault. It's always about the narrative. Once you're expected to apologize, you've already lost the frame. Because now the conversation isn't about what you did. It's entirely about how someone else felt. You say, "That wasn't my intention." They retort, "Intentions don't matter." You say, "Let me explain." They snap, "Don't make excuses." You say, "I'm sorry if you misunderstood." They fire back, "That's not a real apology." Do you see the trap? You're not apologizing to be genuinely forgiven. You're apologizing into a bottomless pit. And the more you feed it, the more they will demand. Here's the brutal psychology. When you apologize under pressure, you don't actually resolve the situation. You open a tab. Now they expect repeated emotional availability from you, endless proof that you've changed, a long-term performance of guilt designed to satisfy their perception. And the very moment you stop performing, they'll immediately say, "So you didn't really mean it?" You're back to your old self. I knew the apology was fake. There's no exit, because you're not in a state of forgiveness. You're in a state of servitude. Machiavelli would never allow himself to remain in that vulnerable position. He would identify this dangerous frame instantly, and then he would detonate it. So what would he do? Simple. He'd expertly reverse the pressure without ever fighting it head-on. Here's how. 1. Mirror their complaint without owning it. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," he'd pivot to, "It wasn't my intention to make you feel that way, and I see how it affected you." The result? They feel heard, but you haven't actually confessed. No direct admission means no direct leverage over you. 2. Acknowledge emotion, not responsibility. He'd say, "I can tell this was painful for you. That matters to me." No guilt, no acceptance of their frame, just an acknowledgement of their emotional gravity. Now they're dealing with someone in control, not someone submitting. 3. Introduce complexity. There's more to the situation than either of us can fully explain in one moment. That powerful phrase often ends arguments, because now you've reframed the conflict as something bigger than simple blame. Now you're not a villain, you're a philosopher in the fog, a complex figure. And philosophers don't apologize, they ponder. Machiavelli's genius was never about raw aggression. It was always about frame control. And the most dangerous frame anyone can hold over you in today's world is moral superiority. If they can hold that over you, they can make you crawl. But if you can fracture their certainty, make them question their own narrative, force them to reflect rather than just accuse, then you're not trapped in their courtroom. You're back on your throne. Machiavelli never used apologies as true resolutions. He used them as resets, not to genuinely rebuild trust, but to strategically rebuild his position. Because in power dynamics, the real goal is never forgiveness. It's always leverage. And sometimes, the fastest way to regain that leverage is to give them a little something that looks like surrender. Here's how Machiavelli would expertly fake repentance. He'd appear regretful, but never overtly emotional. He'd admit something vague, but nothing damning. He'd apologize for perception, not for the actual act. "I never meant to cause confusion. That wasn't my intention. If how I acted gave the wrong impression, I'll own that." Looking back, I see how that might have been received differently. These aren't sincere apologies. They are carefully constructed optical resets. They effectively soften the opponent's grip without ever causing you to drop your own weapon. To truly master the subtle art of power and influence in any situation, delve into Machiavelli's timeless work, The Prince. Find the link in the description. If you see me again, well, congratulations. It means you're starting to think differently. It means you're paying attention. And if that's the case, you already know what to do next. Because in a world full of manipulation, silence, and strategy, you don't follow the noise. You follow the power.